Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Nick. Um, Decided to try filming a few videos and my process of drive-by-wire swapping my 98 Audi A4. Um, the reason being is the car is currently on a standalone ECU and it's using the factory cable throttle body setup, and I'm having issues with the idle being really low on cold starts because the AEB throttle bodies don't have a way to regulate idle. It doesn't have a idler control valve or anything, so I use the stop screw on the throttle body to raise the idle a little bit, but it still idles pretty low when you're on cold starts, and then it gradually increases RPM as the engine heats up, which isn't ideal. So I just sourced some parts to hopefully drive-by-wire swap this car, and the standalone I'm running allows me to control the throttle body and use the electronic pedal and everything. So this isn't going to be a DIY documentation of how to drive-by-wire swap a V5 that's using a factory ECU. Like, you may be able to use it for like the pinouts or something, but it's not exactly how the factory ECU is wired up. I was able to find some of the parts I needed. This is the drive-by-wire pedal. I got this from the junkyard like a year ago. It came from I think a Passat. I don't remember the year for it, but it fits on the pedal bracket for B5, and the wiring might be a little different, but it's a similar setup to the regular B5, like the 01 B5 pedals. Started extending the harness already for it so I could like run it to my standalone. Found I got one of these throttle bodies from the junkyard the same time I pulled the pedal, but I was testing it and none of the circuits were like giving me any kind of reading, so I took the clips off of the old one that I got, and I found the circuit board was like basically fried. Like, all the strips and the resistive strips inside were basically just burnt. So I'm assuming that's why the Audi was in the yard. I don't know, maybe. But I found this one on eBay for, I think it was like 30 some bucks. So I ordered it. Hopefully this one works, because I didn't try testing it yet, but it seems like in pretty good condition. I cleaned the blade up a little bit, so pretty nice. Then I realized I didn't have the connector for this style throttle body, because the cable throttle bodies used an 8-pin connector on it. And I thought they were similar, but these newer styles use a 3 or a 6-pin connector. So I was able to find this on eBay with all the pins and everything. So I might show you guys how to wire those up if we get to that. And I found this. I was able to source the pedal bracket on eBay as well for like 40 bucks, but it's like 60 with shipping and all that stuff. This came from I think it's an 01 Auto B5, but I was like looking at some of the pictures on the AutoZine forum and stuff, and they look similar. I think the only difference I saw was there was an extra tab right here for a second sensor. I think it was for cruise control or one of those sensors that goes right there for the brake pedal, I think. Yeah. I don't think I need it, so I think this bracket should work just fine. I'm gonna try doing it without pulling the whole brake booster out. We'll see how that goes, I guess. So I'll try to explain the best I can how I found the pedal works and some of the pinouts and wiring for the throttle body, because it might vary for different years or different throttle body you use. I couldn't really find definitive answers on the pinouts for this, so I just tore it apart and tested it and just found my own pinouts for it basically. I'll explain the 5 volts and ground and sensor pinouts, and we'll see when I'm wiring it up. For this I just found when I tore apart the old one, I just tested all the circuitry inside and found the sensor wires, the 5-volt circuits, and the sensor ground circuit. So I just wrote all that stuff down and I'll share it with you guys. Maybe it'll help someone that's trying to do a swap or trying to find a pinout for one of these to diagnose it. Okay, so the way these pedals work, there's essentially 2 circuits inside that are like potentiometers, if you guys are familiar with how those work. Think of like a volume knob. It's basically the same thing. Reason for there being 2 is the factory uses them as redundancies. So if one circuit fails, there's a second one that it could use to probably get you home, or still be safe. They're basically mirrored in the way they work. So one circuit would indicate, if you push the pedal, it'll indicate like a higher voltage from 0 to 5 volts. So like say you push the pedal down, the further you go down, the higher the voltage becomes. So no, like 0% TPS would mean 0 volts, and fully pressed would be 5 volts. The second circuit is mirrored, in which whenever the pedal is fully pressed, it would show 0 volts, and when it's released, it would show 5 volts. It's not going to be exactly 5 volts, it's just for keeping it simple to explain. I found it sweeps from 0.5 volts to 4.5. And my ECU requires the first position sensor to show a lower voltage when the pedal is pressed. So at no throttle, it should show the 5 volts, and the farther you go, it should get closer to 0 volts. So that's how I'm gonna wire this up, and I'll show you guys how I get all that calibrated and stuff. I have a pinouts here. I'll probably put it up on the screen, but I found pin 1 would be the 5 volt reference. Pin 2 would be the sensor ground. Pin 3 would be another 5 volt reference. Pin 4 would be the signal, the TPS signal. This would be the second circuit. pin 5 would be the sensor ground for the first circuit, and pin 6 would be the signal, the TPS signal for the first circuit. So I'm gonna be wiring it up that way to my ECU, and hopefully that works. Worst case, I can just swap the wires around if the 5 volts and the signal ground are flipped. I can just repin it and get it working properly. For the throttle body, this has a similar circuit inside where it's 2 position circuits and they're mirrored, where this just works the same way as the pedal, but there's also an additional circuit for the motor inside of here to control the flap. That'll get wired straight to the ECU because it has the motor wire pinouts, and the polarity doesn't matter as much because the ECU will auto detect from a calibration it's gonna run. So that is the explanation of how those systems work. I spent a few minutes looking up at the pinouts for the ECU and figuring out which ones I need. When I initially wired up the standalone in this car, I depinned a lot of the wires that I weren't going to use at the time, but I saved all of them because I knew I was going to need a few of them down the road. So I have to go back through and find the appropriate wires and repin them to the ECU connector, then run them to the throttle body and then to the pedal connector. I plan on doing some of the Deutsch connectors that go from the ECU box into the cabin, just so it's easier to disconnect the ECU harness if I need to pull it for some reason, just to make things a little easier. I added a few of those to the engine harness whenever I rebuilt the whole thing, basically, so I can pull the engine with the harness attached. It just makes it easier to service. So I'm gonna try to utilize some of those connectors to make things a little easier. So I'll take you guys out and set you up somewhere. I'll probably do a time lapse or something and go through the wires and try finding whichever ones I need. Then I'll show you guys how I pin them into the ECU connector. So I found the 4 of the wires I need. This is solely for the throttle body side. These 2 are the motor wires, and these 2 are for the TPS sensor circuit. So I have to repin these back into the harness. Okay, I'm gonna set you guys up in the engine bay and I'll show you guys how I repin these back into the harness. So M1 needs to go to pin 55 on this connector. So okay guys, we're at the point where we need to start pinning the harness for the throttle body connector, I put some quick lube on this just to neaten it up a little bit and to keep it protected from rubbing up against anything by the engine block or the manifold. I plan on reusing this little boot that was on the old throttle body connector. Seems to fit on the new one pretty good, so I'm just gonna use it. Let's get started pinning these. I'll show you guys how I pin them. So since we're gonna be reusing this, I'll just go ahead and put this on first, so because it's easier to get this on before you put all the pins and stuff on there. So just leave it like that for now until we get these pinned pretty good. So the kit came with these little seals. These protect the pins from getting water in them, so just put these on first, because it's easier to put these on now versus putting it on after the pin's on, because the pin can cut the inside of the boots. So okay, now that those are on, you're ready to start stripping the wires and crimping the pins on there. What I like to do is take one of these so you can get an idea of how far back do you need to strip the wires. So I would just strip it like a couple millimeters in, like right there. Should be good. So strip them like that. I'll just show you guys how to do one, and then I'll just fast forward through the rest. But well, I want to make sure these are, I guess, good quality, but kind of bent a little bit for the focus. I use this little crimper, just a generic one from Amazon. It's been working fine for me. Basically rewired the entire engine with this whole thing. What I like to do is start with the bigger press first, then work my way down to the smaller one. I usually start with this one first. Just give it a good little crimp. That one doesn't work, go to a smaller one. Give it a crimp again. And just keep going down. Till you get a good crimp on that fill focus in there. Shouldn't come off if you pull on it. Then what you want to do is slide this up. The little seal has to go between the connector and the wire. Might be a little tricky to get it. When I get it like that, where the little wings can crimp both the wire and the seal at the same time. And let's start with the bigger one and go easy on it. That's good. Now just repeat that for the rest of them. Should be good. I'll just time lapse the rest of these. I think it might actually be easier to put this up there first, then seat it in there. Yeah, that would work better. Yep. Alright, so these are all pinned, ready to go into the connector. Let's get those going. So pin number 1 is S1. So these two reds are M1 and M2. These brown ones are S1 and S2. So pin number 1, and these little prongs need to go like vertically in there. So pin 1. Oh, I also forgot, there's a little purple clip in there that prevents the pins from coming out. You have to slide that to the flat side of the connector. So like that, if you can see it. So the two brown ones go and pin 1 and pin 4. So I hear the click. That should be in there. can pull on it, it won't come out. Pin 1. Pin 4. It's in there. Pin 2 is 5-volt reference. I made this gray one 5-volt reference. That one will go into pin 2. Yeah. Pin 3 and pin 5 are the motor wires. So 3 and 5, these go in there like that. And this one is the 5. These ones are heavier gauge wires, so they'll fight you a little bit. And this last one is the ground, which goes into pin 6. Okay, now that they're all in there properly, you push this purple clip and to lock them in so they won't pull out or anything. Then we can just put our boot over. I was able to relume the IAT sensor harness and the throttle body harness. Pretty nice. Happy with this. Now that this side's done, we have to focus on rewiring the TPS from the ECU to go down to the pedal, and we have to wire in a couple other 5-volt and ground wires from the ECU. I have this 12-pin Deutsch connector that I want to utilize in there. Just make it easier for, instead of having like 3 different connectors, I'll just use this one and pin whatever I need. So this one goes into the cabin. So you can see I already have a couple connectors in here. This one's for, forgot, it's like shift light, and then a couple other outputs and inputs. This was for I think is for the boost knob, the limit boost, the 2-step or launch control, and rolling anti-lag pins that get wired to different buttons, and the clutch pedal switch. and a little knob on the dash. So I might leave these together and just run, like, depin this connector and repin it with this one. Then I'll just add the extra sensor wires and for the 2 TPS from the pedal into this connector in place of that one. So I'll work on that one now.